General Petrine of the Four Riders of Daein. Yes, you heard me correctly. Let the hunt begin!
Our newest Grand Hero battle unit is Petrine, who is one of Daein's 4 riders. They are the generals under Ashnard, and it includes the Black Knight as well. Ashnard's crew has gotten treated pretty well, and that includes Petrine, who is quite a unique unit. She will be a Lance Cavalier with 42 HP, 35 attack, 37 speed, 30 defense, and 24 resistance. Now, those are some impressive offensive stats coming from a free unit and a free Cavalier at that. 35 attack and 37 speed is really good, and Petrine doesn't have super low defense or res either, so she's in a nice spot if you want to invest in her. She will have a res super boon, so if you held onto your 100 trait fruits, then perhaps that could be an option you can pick. I will talk about Petrine's stats more later on, but do know that she is the first Gen 5 melee Cavalier, which means she actually has the highest BST out of all Cavaliers for the moment. Along with some great base stats, Petrine retains her unique weapon, the Flame Lance. This is a 60-mite weapon that is effective against beast foes, and it also grants a flat +3 speed. Some people thought Shinon or Jill would have had beast effective weapons, but it's no mistake that Petrine also came with this banner. She does not like the Lagoos, and she's here to smack some birds and cats around. Along with those effects, at the start of combat, if Petrine is more than 50% HP, calculate damage using foe's res stat and inflict speed and res -5 on foe during combat. Now, that is quite the main ability, so first off, Petrine must be relatively healthy to get Flame Lance's main effects. She will target the res stat instead of defense, and keep in mind this is not adaptive damage like Annette's Crusher or the modern day Dragonstones. Petrine also debuffs the enemy's speed and their res, which sounds really weird, but again, she only targets res, so it works out. Now altogether, Petrine gets +3 speed, so she'll hit 40, which is really good, but then she inflicts -5 speed as well, so that's like hitting 45 speed with just her weapon and no merges. That is amazing. If Petrine can get those follow-up attacks, she also gets 5 extra damage, so Flame Lance is a rather nice offensive weapon, especially with her base stats in mind. The main downside is that once Petrine goes under 50% HP, she loses everything except beast effectiveness and 3 speed. Without adaptive damage, you kinda have to imagine Petrine is more like a 3 movement dragon, but if she gets hurt too much, then she becomes a normal Lance Cavalier again. Flame Lance is definitely a unique weapon, and it does have some downsides, but I think we can all appreciate a creative unique weapon that isn't too gimmicky. Back to Petrine's base kit, she comes with Ignis, which is a bit odd because 30 defense isn't super insane. Attack and speed push 3 grants +5 attack and speed when at 100% HP, but after combat it inflicts 1 recoil damage, so unless you have full healing, this is basically a one-time use skill. As a budget skill, it works with Flame Lance since all of its effects are active, but when it comes to 2nd, 3rd, or 4th battles, then it's not the greatest option. Last, Petrine comes with Threaten, Attack, and Defense 2. Now, this is a surprise for sure. The dual Threatens have only been introduced with their Tier 4 versions, which would be things like Threaten, Attack, and Defense 3. This is the first time we've gone backwards, and while Threaten, Attack, and Defense 2 isn't a new skill, it's much weaker than that last upgrade. At the start of the turn, it inflicts -4 attack and defense on foes within 2 spaces. Threaten, Attack, and Defense 3 not only inflicts -5 attack and defense, but it also gives the user +5 attack and defense field buffs. We don't really see Threaten skills a ton because they're a bit tough to use, and it seems like a really weird choice for Petrine because she is targeting res stats anyway. Now I think they gave it to her because the idea is that Petrine fights, she targets res at first, but then she gets hurt to under 50% HP, and on the next turn, if the enemy is still close and still alive, they get hit by the -4 defense, and Petrine can hopefully finish them off. Not the most sound game plan for PvP, but in PvE I could see it working, especially if you have to deal with a lot of reinforcements. Regardless, while I think the Tier 4 version is much better, this is the easiest way to get a dual threaten in some form. Overall, Petrine has an okay base kit, especially if you want attack and speed push 3 for fodder, but her main skill is definitely the Flame Lance itself. If you're interested in merging Petrine up for her neutral nature, she will get +1 HP, attack, and speed. That is definitely good enough if you don't want to spend trait fruits. She does have her res super boon, but Petrine is definitely trending more toward an offensive role, so attack and speed boons are obviously good choices. Because Flame Lance only activates above 50% HP, the extra res would be nice, so it's still a decent option if you want to go for a more defensive setup. At +10 merges, Petrine is certainly in a good spot. She's got a lot of room to experiment, whether you want to go for a full offensive or you want to go for a bulkier build. Now for stat comparisons, it's going to get a little nasty since Petrine is a part of the newest BST generation. Compared to the faster free-to-play Lance Cavs, well, Petrine handily outdoes all of them, and it's pretty gross if you include Flame Lance's extra perks. She also puts some of her extra points into res, so she won't completely kill over to magic damage. If you want a fast Lance Cavalier, Petrine is an excellent free-to-play option, and you don't have to use the Flame Lance if you want something a bit more traditional. Now, compared to low rarity summonable options, poor Ferdinand just gets overtaken thanks to Petrine's extra BST. She has more HP, attack, and speed, plus now the trait fruits are in the game, Petrine can get a boon if you're going for max investment. Don't get me wrong though, Ferdy is still a solid Lance Cav if you want a speedier unit, since a lot of the other fast Lance Cavaliers are from year 1. He has a more balanced defense and res spread like Petrine, and he'll be in that 3 to 4 star summoning pool, so your chances at randomly getting him are at least the same. Between Petrine and Ferdy, there is the obvious difference in unique weapons, but if you wanted to use another inheritable lance, then Ferdinand is fine as a summonable option rather than spending heroic grails. Flame Lance makes Petrine pretty unique though, so she'll have no problem standing out. Poor Ferdinand is going to be waiting a long time for a unique lance of his own. So we've seen that Petrine has some killer based stats, but how do we put the Flame Lance to good use? If you don't want to spend a lot of rare skills, then honestly Petrine works fine if you just need one good fight out of her, with attack and speed push 3 giving us that one time use of plus 5 attack and speed that's going to give Petrine an effective 61 attack and 50 speed when using the Flame Lance. That is really impressive for a reward unit, and Petrine will have a really good first engagement. The main thing to think about is that Petrine's playstyle is a bit different from the norm. She always targets res stats, so you have to try and find low res enemies. She can't just take out someone like Ileana easily since she has 40 res, where a normal Lance Cav would just destroy her from her low base defense stat. The other thing is that Flame Lance requires Petrine to stay healthy, and that's a bit of a challenge for builds. Normally a super fast offensive unit like Petrine would be great with a desperation build, but once she dips below 50% HP, she loses her in-combat devos and she will target defense again, which isn't a bad thing, you just have to keep it in mind. You can run desperation still, but if you can't stay in that 50% to 75% HP threshold, then Flame Lance loses some of its luster. If you just want to focus on one really good battle, then keep attack and speed push 3, and Petrine can use guard and the Swiss Sparrow Seal. That would be able to deny any fishy special charging builds, and probably want to use a 2 cooldown special like Glimmer instead. Unfortunately, threat to attack and defense 2 isn't that practical on a 3 movement unit, but you can keep it if you want. For some alternative skills, if you just want to try and keep Petrine above 50% for a second fight, then Sturdy Blow or Mirror Strike could help you out. Rouse Speed and Defense or Speed and Res Solo are other good buffing skills. If you want to be a more defensive unit, you could run a stance skill like Steady Posture or Mirror Stance. If you can stall a battle out, Renewal 3 may be a decent skill to get Petrine ready for more rounds of combat. Now for some expensive skill options, Petrine could really use more defense to keep fighting longer. I imagine she wants to fight other melee units with high defense, and generally outside of dragons they all deal physical damage. Cavaliers really are held back by a lack of skill options, and while Sturdy Impact would have been really good here, Petrine's gonna have to settle for something like attack and defense solo. She can use low attack and speed to try and mitigate more damage, and the bonus speed will be great in general. Of course, there are other options like Swiss Sparrow 3, and you can find buffing skills like attack and defense link, or you can opt for the Rally plus Ruse combo since those debuffs can stack with Flame Lances. A Brazen skill could make up for Flame Lance's lack of bonus stats once she gets on low HP, but that's more of a compromise than a synergistic setup. While we have been mainly focusing on offense since Cavaliers have that big attack range, you could give Petrine more defensive premium skills if you want to stay healthy. Flame Lance works on both phases, so you could grab a tier 3 dual stance like Steady Posture 3 or Sturdy Stance 3. We have a bunch of Bond Sacred Seals to choose from as well. Because Flame Lance is so unique and Petrine's base stats are so good to work with, here are a bunch of other skills I want to mention. First off, if you don't want to deal with Flame Lance's res targeting ability, we have a ton of other great lances to use. Geese's Flowing Lance is great, and the new Spirited Spear can give special cooldown, which Cavaliers struggle to get a lot of. With her great attack and speed stats, Petrine is a fantastic Fire Sweep Lance user, and a Slang Lance would work great maybe if you wanted a Gale Force build. She can steal Ferdy's Vanguard Plus or a Barrier Lance for a pure enemy phase set, and as a reminder, the Lofty Blossoms is on Bridal Tanith, who is a Divine Code's combat manual in the permanent paths. If you think about it, Flame Lance grants a flat plus 3 speed and then another plus 5 attack and speed just in the form of debuffs and targeting res mainly. The Lofty Blossoms is a Swiss Sparrow Lance, so it grants plus 4 attack and speed on initiations, and you can refine it with plus 3 speed as well. It is a player phase weapon and you have no beast effectiveness, but that's about as close as you can get to copying Flame Lance's bonus stats if you just want to target defense only. For skills, let's talk about some strange choices when using Flame Lance. First, distant counters. So while DC is great and all, a lot of ranged units like mages generally have higher res stats, which makes Flame Lance less effective. It's a case by case basis, but you can see that there is some slight counterproductiveness if she runs DC. There is also low speed and res or attack and res. Again, the res debuffs work when Flame Lance is active, but if Petrine gets low on HP, that res part becomes useless, whereas the low attack and speed variants would always be active. This can apply to the res variants of Rue's B skills, the newer snag debuffs, and even just chill res. For extra special cooldown, there is Heavy Blade, but keep in mind Flame Lance isn't adding attack buffs, nor does it have attack debuffs, so you're going to need to bring some of those from other skills. If you want a budget B skill, then a Breaker might be great because turns out a lot of high defense units like to have fallout prevention skills. Petrine is a pretty good example of a unit who can break through those high defense walls. So should you promote Petrine to 5 stars? Well, her stats are really solid, partly thanks to being the next BST generation. She should have the highest BST for a Cavalier for now, but her 35 attack and 37 speed is some of the best you can ask for in the class. Definitely geared toward offense, but her defense and res are also both workable to some extent. As for her skills, Flame Lance is easily one of the more unique weapons around. Targeting res instead of defense instantly makes Petrine stand out, and this lance also inflicts stat debuffs while being a beast effective weapon too. If you don't like dealing with beast units and you don't have Brave Eliwood, Petrine is your next best option. Attack and speed push 3 and threat attack and defense 2 are both usable skills, but they aren't exactly must keeps. They are pretty nice for skill following purposes though. As mentioned, Petrine is a beast stat wise, and Flame Lance immediately changes her playstyle from the norm. Because she targets resistance, you have to shift target selection to low res enemies, and if Petrine drops a low HP, you have to switch back because she's going to be dealing physical damage instead. While at full HP, this makes Petrine sort of like a 3 movement dragon. It does make builds a bit awkward. You need to focus on staying healthy while also increasing attack and speed like usual. Cavaliers really would love some other skill options, like if they had Dive Bomb, then that would have been perfect for Flame Lance's playstyle. Even though there isn't a perfect setup, there are definitely going to be a lot of different takes on how to build Petrine, so do be open to ideas. I think she's very much worth having one 5-star copy of simply for the beast killing niche. You can always sub her in on an arena assault run, or maybe you could have a spot on an 8th race team slot. Even though we don't see generic beast enemies in PvE content, Faye has added new enemy types before, so in the future we could get generic beast foes to fight against. I mean, the boss of this current book is a beast unit, so I don't feel it's too far-fetched that next book they could add more into the PvE rotation. Now that I think about it, I would prefer not to fight generic beast flyers with their movement. That's all I got for this video. Let me know what you think about Petrine as a unit. I think she's a very neat reward unit, and Flame Lance is certainly a creative weapon. I think it would have been better if it worked more like Hell's new Scythe, but hey, you can't have everything. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.